He built Rocky, then the world forgot him. Decades after achieving worldwide fame, Sylvester Stallone returns to the rundown boxing gym where his journey began, only to discover that the man who once believed in him is now mopping floors, invisible to the world. What happens next is a powerful, emotional, and true story of loyalty, legacy, and redemption. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Most people revisit the past through memories, through faded photographs in dusty boxes, videos buried in the corners of old phones, or stories told in shaky voices at holiday dinners. But Sylvester Stallone didn't want a memory. He wanted something real, something tangible, something he could smell, hear, touch, because some ghosts didn't belong in frames or pixels. They belonged in sweat-soaked wood floors and echoes that lived in walls. It had been decades since he last stepped foot into the building that shaped his life. Not a studio, not a red carpet, not a mansion in Beverly Hills, but a modest gym on the edge of a forgotten block in Philadelphia, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, where every creak of the floorboards told a story of pain, hunger, and unpolished ambition. He had no camera crew with him, no assistant, no driver. Just Stallone, hood up, cap low, walking slowly through the misty air of a cold Tuesday morning. He could have driven a luxury car, sure, but he took a cab. It felt right. It felt honest. The cabbie didn't even recognize him. "This the place?" he asked, squinting at the building through the cracked windshield. The sign above the door was so rusted it looked like a relic of a war. The paint peeled off in long strips, like skin shedding from time. The neon lights that once blinked Malone Boxing Club were long dead. "Yeah," Stallone said, handing the fare with a quiet nod. "This is it." As he stood outside, he took a breath, the cold slicing his lungs like tiny blades. For a moment, he almost turned back. This wasn't a place for movie stars anymore. It wasn't even a place for fighters. It was a skeleton wearing the suit of a memory, but something deeper, something that whispered from within, pushed him forward. The door creaked as he opened it, just like it used to. The smell hit him instantly. Sweat, leather, dust, and something else, something harder to define. Maybe humility, maybe truth. The gym was almost empty. Two boys, barely teenagers, hit mitts with lackluster rhythm in the far corner. A fan buzzed uselessly overhead. The heavy bags hung limp, untouched. The ring ropes sagged under their own weight. The walls that once echoed with barked instructions and grunts of effort now stood silent, like they'd given up speaking long ago. Stallone walked slowly. Each step brought back another moment. The first time he stepped into this gym at 19. The time he got knocked out and woke up to the smell of antiseptic and Frankie's cigar. The speech Frankie gave him when he said he'd write Rocky. And the silence that followed, not out of doubt, but of reverence. Everything was still here. But everything had changed. Then he heard it. Not the sound of gloves, not a bell, but a mop. Swish. Swish. It came from the hallway behind the reception desk, where the office and lockers used to be. A slow, tired rhythm, like a song nobody listens to anymore, but someone keeps playing anyway. Stallone moved toward the sound, and then he saw him. Frankie Malone, or at least what was left of him. He was smaller now, thinner, bent. The fire in his frame was now a flicker. His Phillies cap was faded, his flannel shirt buttoned wrong. But the hands, that's what Stallone noticed. Those same thick, scarred hands. The hands that used to hold mitts like stone walls. The hands that used to tape his wrists. They now held a mop handle, trembling slightly with age. He didn't see Stallone at first, just kept mopping. Stallone froze in the hallway. For a few moments, he just watched. Something in him cracked open. Not sadness, not pity. Something deeper, like guilt mixed with gratitude, wrapped in disbelief. Frankie turned slowly, adjusting his glasses with a single finger. "You lost, kid?" he said, voice gravelly but familiar. "We're not open yet. Kids come in, tear the place apart, never clean a damn thing." His tone was tired, but still carried that old edge, that sharpness that once made boys into men. Stallone didn't respond immediately. He took off his cap. "I used to be one of those kids," he said, his voice low. Frankie blinked, tilting his head. He looked closer. "No," he whispered. Stallone nodded. A small, almost apologetic smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "It's me, Frankie." The mop slipped from Frankie's hand. It clattered against the floor like a bell being rung after a long silence. "You son of a..." Frankie started, then stopped. His eyes glistened. Not tears exactly, just the threat of them. He stepped forward, one shaky step at a time. When he reached Stallone, he didn't hug him. He just put a hand on his shoulder and left it there. For a full minute, they stood in silence. "I thought you forgot," Frankie said finally. "Everybody forgets." Stallone shook his head. "I never forgot. I just didn't know how to come back." Frankie looked around the gym and chuckled dryly. "Yeah, well, doesn't look like much anymore." "It looks like everything," Stallone replied. A creak from behind caught their attention. The two kids had stopped sparring. One of them stared at the scene in disbelief. "Is that Rocky?" Stallone turned slowly, gave a soft wave, then looked back at Frankie. "You still teaching?" Frankie gave a half smile. "I try. Mostly I just mop now." Stallone looked at the mop on the floor. "Not today." But why did Stallone really come back? And what will he do now that he found the man who shaped him, buried beneath time and neglect? Frankie didn't want to sit, but Stallone insisted. The two of them settled on the edge of the old ring, the ropes slack and dust-covered. Stallone ran his hand along the worn canvas like he was touching a relic. Frankie just stared out at the empty gym floor, his mop lying forgotten in the corner like a sword retired from war. "You remember this ring?" Frankie asked, voice quieter now, as if afraid the walls might hear. "I remember every time I bled on it," Stallone replied, smiling. "Which was a lot." Frankie let out a breath that could have passed for a laugh. "You weren't the strongest, weren't the fastest either." "I know," Stallone said. "But you got back up," Frankie continued. "Every time. That's what made me believe in you." There was a pause, thick, heavy, sacred. "Why didn't you ever come back?" Frankie asked suddenly. His tone wasn't accusing. It was tired, resigned. Stallone leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I didn't know how. I told myself I'd wait for the right moment. Then the years kept passing. One premiere turned into another. One loss, one win. It all blurs. I guess I was afraid. Afraid of what? That it had all changed. That you'd changed." Frankie looked at him, eyes glassy. "I didn't change, Sly. I just disappeared." The gym groaned softly around them as if sighing in agreement. Stallone hesitated, then pulled something from his coat pocket. A small photo, worn and faded. It was a picture of him at 23, gloves on, nose bloodied, and Frankie behind him with a towel over his shoulder, mid-yell. "You kept that?" Frankie asked. "Always," Stallone said. "It reminded me where I came from, who made me." Frankie stared at it for a long time. Then he shook his head slowly. "You know what hurts the most? Not the loneliness, not the bills, not even the mopping. It's watching this place turn into something people forget, like we never mattered." "You mattered to me," Stallone said firmly. They sat in silence for a moment longer until the door creaked open. The two kids from earlier peeked inside again, curiosity lighting their faces. Stallone waved them in. "You boys train here?" The taller one nodded. "Kinda. Coach Malone shows us stuff, when he's not cleaning." Frankie waved them off. "They're just messing around. Don't listen to them." "Messing around is how I started too," Stallone said. He stood and walked to the old lockers. One still had his name, faded and barely legible. He opened it. Inside, miraculously untouched, was his old jump rope, coiled like a memory waiting to be unwound. He tossed it to the taller kid. "Start with that. 10 minutes. No breaks." The boy stared at it like it was made of gold. Then he nodded and began jumping awkwardly in the corner. Frankie watched in stunned silence. "You just made his year." Stallone shrugged. "You made mine. More than once." Frankie stood too, slower now. "I still come here every day, even when no one shows up. I can't let it die. Stallone looked around again, this time with different eyes. Not just the eyes of a man remembering, but of a man realizing something he'd been blind to. The place was still breathing. Barely, but breathing. You ever think about selling? Stallone asked. Frankie flinched like he'd been slapped. To who? Some real estate company? Let them turn it into condos? Nah, let it rot before I let that happen. Stallone smiled. Good answer. The front door opened again. This time it was someone new. A younger man in a suit, clipboard in hand, followed by a woman with a camera. They looked out of place, like bankers at a funeral. Mr. Malone? The man asked. Frankie's face dropped. What is this? Stallone asked. Frankie sighed. City inspection. Said we're behind on rent. Been trying to catch up. The man spoke again, already looking impatient. You've got 30 days to vacate unless the back rent is paid. Stallone stepped forward, calm but firm. How much? The man blinked. I'm sorry? I said how much, Stallone repeated, his voice steady. The woman with the camera lowered her lens. Recognition flickered in her eyes. The man checked the clipboard. $8,320. Stallone nodded slowly. Then he reached into his back pocket, pulled out a wallet, and thumbed through a few bills before stopping. No, he said. You don't just pay that in cash. That's not how we handle this. He turned to Frankie. Let me fix this. Properly. Frankie looked stunned. You can't just... I can, Stallone said. And I will. Frankie's gym isn't just dying from neglect. It's under threat of being shut down entirely. Stallone's return wasn't just emotional. It might have come just in time to save it. The next morning, the gym was buzzing in a way it hadn't in years. Word had gotten out. First as a whisper on neighborhood streets, then a murmur online, and finally a roar through news segments and local blogs. Stallone returns to forgotten Philly gym. Rocky saves the ring. The legend reunites with his coach. Cameras now gathered at the corners, respectfully distant but undeniably present. Kids lined the sidewalk outside. Men in their 40s brought their sons, recalling their own days shadowboxing in the alley behind the gym. Elderly boxers who once laced up under Frankie's supervision came to pay tribute, some with canes, others with tears. Inside, the gym was alive again. Stallone had made no grand speech, no press release, no self-congratulatory post. He just showed up early, holding 2 coffees, one for himself, one for Frankie, and started sweeping the floor. You're not gonna put me out of a job, are you? Frankie grumbled, taking the coffee and sitting heavily on a bench. Just borrowing your broom, Stallone said with a small grin. Frankie smiled, but something hung behind it, a shadow in his eyes. You know this won't last, right? He muttered. They'll forget, just like before. Let them forget, Stallone said. You and I won't. That afternoon, Stallone met with a lawyer in the back office, the same room where he'd once iced a broken hand on a bucket of melting ice. He had a plan: restructure the gym under a community trust, register it as a historic site, fund scholarships for underprivileged kids who wanted to train. The blueprints were clean, the funding ready, but it required one thing. Frankie had to sign the transfer of ownership to the new foundation, and Frankie refused. You want to save the gym, he said, standing by the ring with arms crossed. But not like this. You're trying to protect something by changing what it is. Stallone exhaled slowly. Frankie, I'm not taking it from you. I'm giving it back to the community. You'll still run it, but it'll be safe. Frankie shook his head. I'd rather let it rot on my own terms than turn it into a charity case with my name on a plaque. The words stung. Not because of what was said, but because Stallone understood him too well. Pride ran deep in men like Frankie. Pride and pain often lived in the same room. That night, Stallone sat alone in the gym after everyone had gone. He looked up at the rafters, at the bag chains clinking softly in the breeze of an old fan. He remembered the nights he slept here, when he couldn't afford rent. He remembered watching Frankie patch holes in his gloves with duct tape, never once complaining. Then he noticed something. A loose floorboard behind the office desk. He knelt, pried it up carefully, and found a dusty metal box inside. Inside were Polaroids, old letters, receipts, and a will. Frankie's will. In it, written in barely legible ink, was a line. "If anything ever happens to me, I want the gym to go to the kid with the crooked nose who never stopped getting up." Stallone stared at the page, heart pounding. He took the box, walked outside, and found Frankie sitting on the curb in the cold. "You planning to die tonight?" Stallone asked. Frankie gave him a look. "What?" "Because, if you're not," Stallone said, placing the box on the ground, "then maybe you should start thinking like someone who wants this place to live." Frankie opened the lid. He saw the papers. He saw the words. His hands trembled, not from age this time, but from emotion. "I forgot I wrote that," he whispered. Stallone sat beside him. "I didn't." 2 days later, they held a press conference, not to announce a donation, not to sell a story, but to declare a rebirth. The Malone Boxing Foundation was launched with Stallone's funding but Frankie's leadership. The gym would remain open, independent, and owned by the community. New equipment was ordered, new trainers brought in, medical staff certified, a youth program drafted. The city waived the back taxes. It was more than a comeback. It was a resurrection. But the past wasn't done with them yet. The very next week, a lawyer arrived with a court notice. A private development group had already purchased the building 6 months earlier during a quiet foreclosure process. The foundation had no legal ownership. The sale had gone through while Frankie was hospitalized briefly from a fall, and he had no idea. The new owners planned to demolish the gym in 30 days to build luxury apartments. It wasn't just about rent anymore. Now, it was about survival. Frankie was devastated. Stallone furious. "I should have come back sooner," Stallone said, pacing. "No," Frankie replied. "You came when it mattered." They had less than a month to undo a legal sale, convince the city to recognize the gym as historically protected, and raise awareness enough to rally public pressure. And then, a boy walked in. The same kid from before. The one Stallone gave the jump rope to. He had a bruised eye and a split lip. "What happened?" Frankie asked. The boy shrugged. "My stepdad." Frankie's face tightened. Stallone knelt down. "You want to learn how to protect yourself?" The boy nodded. But his eyes weren't looking at Stallone. They were looking at the photos on the wall. At Frankie. At the ring. "I want to learn how to stand back up." Just as Stallone and Frankie secure the gym's future emotionally and symbolically, they discover the building is no longer theirs. The gym has been sold behind their backs, and its destruction is imminent. What was a personal reunion now becomes a public battle for legacy, history, and justice. The news spread faster than they expected. Within 3 days, local papers ran the headline, "Historic Philly Gym to be demolished," despite Stallone's efforts. Talk shows debated it. Sports commentators revisited clips from Rocky, juxtaposing fiction with a very real fight. And every day people began showing up, not just fans, but boxers, veterans, single mothers, ex-cons, teachers, people Stallone had never met, but Frankie had somehow touched. They came with signs, with gloves, with stories. A former student drove in from Ohio just to testify at a city hearing. A retired Marine said the gym saved him after deployment. A young girl, just 10, stood on a milk crate outside and told the crowd through a megaphone, "Coach Frankie taught me how to be strong when no one else did." But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The developer was powerful, backed by investors and legally protected. The city's hands were tied, they said. The contract was valid. Sentiment didn't overrule signature. Still, Stallone wasn't done. "Then we make it a story the whole country hears," he told Frankie. He scheduled an open event, one final fight night. The last round. It would be streamed live, public, free. A fundraiser, a statement, and Frankie would be the one to open the event. The night arrived, and the gym glowed like a cathedral of sweat and redemption. String lights were hung. The crowd packed in, shoulder to shoulder, reporters lining the back wall. Outside, a line wrapped around the block. Frankie stood in the center of the ring. He wore a brown cardigan, too big for his shrinking frame, and his old Phillies cap. When he spoke, the room fell silent. "This place," he began, was never about boxing. It was about teaching people how to fall and how to get back up. I've watched boys become men here. I've watched people become more than what the world expected of them, and now they want to tear it down for marble kitchens and rooftop pools. He paused, voice wavering. I won't let that be my legacy. I won't let that be our story. The room erupted. People stood, cheered, clapped, cried. Stallone stepped in, hands behind his back. You still got it, he whispered. Frankie chuckled. Hell of a retirement speech, huh? The event went viral in real time. Clips circulated faster than the event ended. Famous boxers posted in support. Journalists dug deeper into the developers' shady acquisitions. Even politicians weighed in. The city was flooded with petitions, letters, media pressure. And then came the moment no one expected. A lawyer representing the development group requested a closed-door meeting with Stallone and Frankie. Inside, he revealed that one of the investors had pulled out, citing public backlash. Without them, the project was financially unstable. The group was willing to sell the property back, quietly. The price? $400,000. Frankie paled. But Stallone leaned forward. We'll pay it, every cent, and we'll do it publicly. You're willing to buy back something that was stolen from you? The lawyer asked. Stallone's voice didn't flinch. No, I'm willing to make sure nobody steals it again. 3 days later, the check cleared. Ownership was transferred to the Malone Boxing Foundation. Legally, permanently. The gym would not be torn down. It would be restored, expanded, protected. But fate had one final uppercut to deliver. A week after the papers were signed, Frankie collapsed outside the gym. The doctors said it was his heart, quiet, sudden. He never woke up. The city declared a memorial day in his honor. The gym held a candlelight ceremony. Thousands attended, and on the front of the gym, under the newly restored sign, a plaque was mounted. This place was never about boxing. It was about getting back up. Coach Frankie Malone. 3 months passed. The gym was louder now. Young feet pounding the floor, gloves slapping pads, music thumping through the walls. A new mural stretched across the back wall. Frankie in his prime, arms folded, eyes kind but firm. Stallone visited often, but never announced it. He watched from the shadows, sometimes handing a kid a jump rope, sometimes tightening the laces on someone's gloves. One afternoon, the boy with the bruised lip, the one from the foreclosure days, finished a sparring session and sat beside Stallone on the bench. You knew him long? The boy asked. Stallone nodded, long enough to know I owed him everything. The boy looked at the ring. He said pain makes you honest. Stallone smiled softly. He also said honesty makes you strong. They sat in silence for a while. Then the boy stood up, wiped sweat from his brow, and walked toward the ring. Stallone watched him go, and for a brief moment he saw himself, young, uncertain, bloody but unbroken, stepping into the ring for the first time. Some stories begin with a punch. Others begin when someone decides to stand back up. And some, like this one, live forever in the hearts they helped shape. Thank you so much for watching. Your time means everything to us, and we hope this story moved you as much as it moved us. If it did, please consider leaving a comment, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel, because powerful stories deserve to be heard. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the impact of one small act of courage.